Hello, and welcome to Tea with me, Cheryl C. Hope I am delivering this week's tea times and teacups via video, or at least some part of it. A jam-packed week. Lots happened this week, especially with proxy season, AGM season, kicking off. So in speaking about the spirit of AGMs, I first want to acknowledge something that happened on Thursday, which is a UK listed company, Drax, having to abandon their AGM after disruptive and arguably violent protests from activists. So here at Tea, we do not condone violence of any form. We want to be able to participate in engagement with companies in a constructive and mutually respectful way. Others, like our partners, ShareAction, believe in exactly the same things. Other shareholders attend AGMs. It's important that they are able to engage meaningfully and peacefully and respectfully. Also, let's remember that the people that make up these companies are people. They're human beings. People can become scared, right? So I've spoken to numerous company secretaries, assistant company secretaries, heads of governance, etc., the people who have to put together these AGMs. And there have been situations where these individuals have said to me, look, I was scared shitless because of these protesters. Guys, that's not cool, right? So climate and social activists, I don't know if you'll listen, but I share your passion and your views and your concerns, but we have to be able to engage. We cannot change the world by being violent and being kicked out. So I ask you to please consider your fellow stakeholders, consider your tactics. Happy to engage with you on this matter, but do also remember what I said about humans, right? Especially after what happened last year in the US with the CEO of United Health, essentially losing his life because of a violent protest. So let's make sure we proceed in the most constructive and mutually respectful way. So basically, for AGMs, in our opinion, it's important that they continue to be in person, as well as having an online element. Just continuing on about how to do things, how to communicate the message on climate, for example. Why not try it like these ChapterZero people? I mean, how many times have I said before how much I admire ChapterZero? So I have had people say to me, oh, Cheryl, it's just a bunch of like retired women championing the climate in their spare time. And my response to that is, okay, maybe there's a lot of women. There's 2 men now, that's great. But basically what Julie Baddeley, the founder and the chair of the board, I believe she is stepping down soon, but the concept that they have conceived is just great. Essentially, it's an evolution rather than a revolution. They are basically communicating with people like them, meaning board directors, and skilling up their fellow board directors on messages and information about climate change. And then working on proliferating that across that non-executive director board community in the hopes that one day all companies will have a board representative focused on climate. So I believe this is such a noteworthy cause and way of doing something well that involves, the environment. So kudos to you, Julie and team. I think you already know how much I respect you and how I think you're so amazing to the point where I was probably very upset because I couldn't achieve something in relation to Julie. But basically know that you are very well respected within our organization. And we cannot talk peaceful activism without referencing ShareAction. So 20 years ago, I was a 26-year-old, 27-year-old in the UK, fresh from Canada. And basically, ShareAction was just starting out back then. And look at them today. So from being ignored to being thought of as crazy to being now mainstream. So there is a way of doing things correctly and well, and that always involves engagement in our point of view. So well done, ChapterZero. Well done, ShareAction. We look to you as inspirations, and I'm sure companies too look at you in a similar way and are appreciative of the peaceful and mutually respectful approach that you are undertaking. Okay, so looking at some good examples when thinking about the spirit of AGMs. Standard Chartered, right? Our current Teacup honorees of Dr. José Viñals and Bill Winters as the chair and CEO combo. Now, this AGM, as I already put in my previous content, was, wow, quite the event. Very raucous. I guess maybe aligned with what financial institutions experience when it comes to AGMs. It doesn't have to be that way. It was, of course, really exhausting, an hour and a half late, long queues, raised my hand repeatedly over the hour and a half question and answer session. And basically, I didn't get picked because there were so many people also wanting to ask questions. Disruption from a group of 50 or so protesters created this time because it was a choir singing the same song over and over and over and over. And I think they were allowed to continue actually for about 12 minutes, and then they just wouldn't stop. And then, of course, they ended up getting ejected, which in my opinion was a complete waste of an opportunity to actually have meaningful engagement. So great that they got heard, but how do you get to a solution if you're just singing and drowning out the board? Anyway, so kudos to Dr. José Viñals because it cannot be easy sharing something like that. And then basically for him treating their stakeholders equally respectfully. So I really appreciated, despite all of that brouhaha, how he still made time to make sure that he said hello to the older retail shareholders who obviously have been attending every single year because Dr. Viñals knew them by name. He made sure that they had the opportunity, despite all of the disruption, to actually ask their questions. And then he even made the time to call out a retail shareholder who wasn't there, who was absent because that retail shareholder had passed away. And the thing is, I don't think he was just, doing this for show. It felt like he actually really cared about these people. So, although I was miffed that I didn't get to ask my question, which was actually directed to Bill Winters and TradFi Progress, I respect very much Dr. Viñals' approach for sharing this AGM, which probably says a lot about his character and his understanding of good governance. He is stepping down this year because he will have reached his 9 years. So I guess this is thanks for everything that you have done and everything that you're doing, Dr. Viñals. I know that you are a very well-respected European and international economist, so can't wait to see what the next chapter of your gig is going to be. And then, Mr. Winters, why we appreciate Bill so much here is because, yeah, we're a bit of, crypto tech finance bros here at T. So we like the idea of traditional finance being modernized. So when I attended the AGM, in Bill Winters' presentation, he was covering how Standard Chartered was modernizing, how they were considering the next generation, the younger generations, and I actually wanted to hear more about that. I actually wanted to hear about their initiatives around, things like tokenization and blockchain. So hopefully this year I will have the opportunity to ask those questions. In any case, reading their materials and staying on top of what Standard Chartered is doing is interesting. Of course, in selecting exemplary people, you have to be prepared that you are not always going to get everything perfect. Okay, so I don't think there's like one perfect person or company. And we did already say that Standard Chartered was probably not going to be the favorite of activists. And many activists will just not be happy with many companies anyways, because their ideologies probably just differ so very much. But basically, this year we can probably expect some activity, some attention around remuneration of the executive. So basically, there is already discussions around the quantum of pay of Winters. We can look at that very quickly, but it ties on to the topic of the that combo of CEO and Remcom chair. That role of chair of the remuneration committee is not an easy one, arguably probably not the most fun one. Honestly, I've worked on so many remuneration related cases that I can't help but have a deep admiration for these Remcom chairs. I also understand the concerns around pay quantum, but then I'm an entrepreneur and I believe in rewarding for success. And frankly, because I believe so much in the UK and hope so much for the regeneration of our capital markets so that we can be, a key force on the world stage, I do want the best and the greatest talents stewarding our UK companies. And guess what? That comes at a price. So I think Bill Winters is a good CEO for many reasons, including on his strategy on modernizing traditional finance. So let's continue our discussion on the spirit at AGMs by looking at two more great examples of engagement. So Rolls-Royce and Pearson, both great British businesses. Starting with Rolls-Royce, I'll be honest with you, they gave me an extra pep in my step this week in watching the AGM unfold online, which was happening in Derby. I'm in London, so I had to attend virtually. But here I posed a question about the popularity of Rolls-Royce amongst Gen Z on the viral Gen Z platform for trading called Trading 212. So the company secretary, who in fact has the title that is super appropriate of Chief Governance Officer, reads out the question. And here the chair, Dame Anita Frew, responds to the question. So just quickly on the titling of people, I've said many times to company secretaries themselves and others that the title of company secretary doesn't really represent the specialism and the importance of the work of the company secretary. And I always thought that Chief Governance Officer was much more appropriate. So it's great that they have this title at Rolls-Royce, which is quite telling about the culture of the company. I'll let you watch the video. It's only a minute and a half long, but just to say that Dame Anita's response to my question about why so popular amongst Gen Z was very sweet, for a lack of a better term, but also is very pertinent, I think. So she says that STEM is just an interesting topic and basically alludes to the younger generation really being interested in STEM. And I think there is truth in that. When I was younger, being Gen X, there was so much emphasis on being cool. And basically nerds like me, being inherently nerdy, probably worked really hard to try to be cool. And so I'm happy that kids today don't have to go through that as much, maybe, because being nerdy is actually quite cool. And she also continues on, Dame Anita also continues on about engineering just being extremely important and potentially life and world changing, and how at Rolls-Royce that's what they're doing, that's what they're looking to do. And she also pointed to great British business, which Rolls-Royce is, and I think that is so important because I always say to our Gen Z cohorts here at T, who basically say, UK companies are so boring, can't even name any off the top of their heads, but they can name like 10 US companies like that. It's so great to hear and be reminded about the great British businesses that we do still have in this country. And I look forward to reminding our group about this much more. They've got an apprenticeship program, which is super cool. So last year they had 400 of the apprentices attend the AGM and meet the board event. This year they've expanded to 1,200. That's amazing. So I'd love to meet some of those Gen Zs. And in fact, this is another thing that's really hopeful, including for the discussion around the future of AGMs and the hope that UK companies will continue to have the in-person element of their AGMs, is Dame Anita has said, come in person to our AGMs, see how we operate. meet our apprentices, meet the board. How cool is that? Anyway, I think there's a lot to be said about Dame Anita. This is going to sound maybe extra nerdy, but yes, I have done a little bit of research which I'd like to share with you. But before that, I just wanted to touch on Trading 2-1 because, as I mentioned, I don't think Rolls-Royce knows how popular they are. So Trading 212, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know about trading, not much about it until late 2023 or something like that, where one of our Gen Z ambassadors, Neem Patel, who is a serial entrepreneur, I always mention him, said, you should check out Trading 212. It's very democratic. There's no fees or very little fees. And so I checked it out. Gosh, it is actually really, it draws you in. It has very much of a community feel, and their chat, their community is really sticky. So you have the likes of others, like II Interactive Investor, wanting to replicate something similar. eToro is also huge. They have a huge community as well, but in a different way. So even them, they're like, how does this work at Trading 212? How is it so sticky? Sometimes it is a bit toxic, and the toxicity tends to happen when 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 the stock market is down, as to be expected. But back to the point. So Rolls-Royce has 205,000 followers on their chat. There's nearly 5,000 posts. Now, that is huge, especially when you compare it to other UK companies, right? So let's take a look at a few more, right? So Babcock International, okay, 619 members. And then BAE Systems, 6.4K members. Let's see what else. Excuse me. Is very well known. Burberry, 1.2K. Barclays, 25.1K. Cool. What else would be popular? Tesco, 5.1. Wow. AstraZeneca, 2.4. Aston Martin, 21.3. Golly. And then let's take a look at the most popular ones. So you've got these general chats here too. So I'm signed up to many of these. So Dividends has 544K, News nearly 500K, Tesla has 491,000 followers, right? So I am also a follower, a member of these. And then what else is it? Microsoft 95K, MicroStrategy 28K. Let's see, Palantir 55K. Gosh, I mean, like these are super popular stocks, right? Like Tesla. So the viral Gen Z stocks, Tesla, Nvidia, 158,000. So this is really active. Let's just take a look. So I'm also part of that 20.3K post. So here there's so much chat, and sometimes it can get quite toxic. Tesla is also really active. I mean, it's massive, right? So 17.2K posts. And then Rolls-Royce. And by the way, you cannot cheat this. You can't buy followers, at least not that I know of. So basically 205,000 with 5,000 posts. That spells to me that this is a popular stock, and the messages that are exchanged here are probably much more measured and well thought through, because on Nvidia's, for example, there's so much chat, and frankly, a lot of the times it's just people asking, is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? Which way should I go? Which then always reminds me that, my goodness, we have a lot more to do to make sure that people are better prepared when they decide to participate in trading, because a lot of these people can lose money and do lose money. I know what that feels like, having lived as a finance bro, as a social experiment, in the large part of last year. So in any case, for investor relations officers and company secretaries, non-exec directors, it's important that you know about these online trading platform chats. Trading 212 is just one of them. There's others as well. Yeah, a bit of a digression, but let's go back to the main point. We were talking about Rolls-Royce, and we were talking about their popularity amongst Gen Z. So which is really interesting because just a few years ago, when I was in Cambridge as the entrepreneur in residence at the King's Entrepreneurship Lab, there was a huge protest when the then CEO of Rolls-Royce, Warren East, came to speak. I thought the protest, to be honest, was quite unfair because he was incredibly respectful of the protesters and essentially allowed them to disrupt for about 30 minutes, including the students speaking for about 20 minutes on the war in Yemen and the involvement of, or their thought on Rolls-Royce being involved in that. But when Warren East invited them to sit and listen and engage afterwards, they refused and they just left. And then when we came out of the auditorium, the students basically tried to stop us from going to our destination for dinner. So, we have an important right to protest. And certainly those students are allowed to protest. And certainly Warren East, a very experienced and accomplished businessman and engineer, and also Kingsman himself, understands that. But protesters need to understand and value engagement because one-sided dialogue is no dialogue. Anyway, so just a couple of important nuggets there. Happy to continue on with this. There was a second set of questions I asked, which I will share in a subsequent video. Essentially, it's a question that I am posing to more and more companies. It's about the company's measurement and management of the impact of modernization, particularly of the employment of AI and its impact on society and the environment. And I think they responded sufficiently well. I'm going to look into it a bit more and then share and also follow up with the company. But before going on to the next segment, I do just want to zoom in a little bit about Dame Anita Frew, because she reminded me about many important things about the role of non-executive directors, about the role of governance in successful companies. I think a lot of the times we dismiss, non-executive directors or chairs as just ornamental and basically whatever. They're just there to sign off the paperwork. But actually, it's a lot more than that. I've always believed it. I've always believed that. So in hearing Dame Anita speak and presiding over the Rolls-Royce AGM, it gave me a lot of hope. Now, I must confess, I've known about Dame Anita for some time because I interviewed her in 2021 in relation to the Non-Executive Director Awards. So I got to spend about an hour with her over the phone. Unfortunately, it was during lockdown, so I didn't have a chance to meet her in person, but I came from that call with this, well, I had a lot of notes I ended up taking, but I came away from that phone call thinking, oh my God, how does she manage to do her job? So I say that because she seems really human. She seems to have really high EQ. She seems really soft and warm and kind, which basically are attributes that ordinarily point to someone being inefficient or unsuccessful in business, where you're supposed to be tough, you're supposed to be strong, you're supposed to be assertive, you're supposed to be loud, punching through, impatient. She seemed to be the opposite of all that. And then you look at what she's accomplished and what she was doing at the time at Croda. And then she ran me through, it was like a masterclass on how to run a board and know your stuff. She basically talked to me about the board processes, the efficiencies they created. So instead of some of these packs being like, 100 pages long, became 50 pages long, the steps she undertook to understand the business, how she stays on top of the performance of the board, what, NEDs are supposed to do, and her work as chair, and essentially what her past experiences have allowed her to add to her position as then chair of Croda. And so I just thought, my God, she seems really accomplished and really respected and even loved. So I just thought that's incredible that she's succeeded in that way. I think oftentimes, maybe still today, we attribute success to very masculine traits. And I think that changed quite a lot, especially with the arrival of the former New Zealand Prime Minister. You know, the good things that diversity, equitability, and inclusion did promote. So I think we should all be proud of what was accomplished with the governance reforms, with push for greater diversity, equitability, and inclusion, and the step towards stakeholder capitalism, all of which I believe are now transforming into, you know, a new stage. And I cannot wait to see what that's going to be like, especially with the greater focus, hopefully, on emotional intelligence, given the fact that we have greater exposure to technology and more AI. So basically, yeah, Dame Anita just really inspired me this week and gave me hope about the future of non-executive directors, which then, interestingly, ties me back to Sir Roger Carr, who, of course, is iconic in the world of chairs and non-executive directors. So I remember him from Cadbury because of the craft deal. I worked on that years ago. That was one of my early M&A transactions. I'm sure like the Cadbury family would have loved him to have negotiated more than an extra 100p. But he's also extremely well known for his role as chair at BAE. And in 2019, he was awarded the Lifetime Achievement by the Non-Executive Director Award. So that's me. I gave him the award. And this simple but entirely pertinent article on his speech so still stands and actually is a really great reminder. So it's cool that Peel Hunt have it on their website. They are the founder of the NED Awards. 5 qualities which make a good non-executive director. I'll drop the link to this in the comments. Very simply, have the right motivation. What can you contribute over what's in it for me? Don't confuse helping with meddling. Role confusion is dangerous for everyone. So he thinks this is the biggest challenge if you're used to an executive role. So I think it's so spot on because transitioning from an exec to non-exec, I personally found that extremely hard. And to be honest with you, I had my little experiment with non-executive directorship 3 years ago, and it was such a hard experience, such a negative experience that I'm still recovering from it, but actually now feel that I've got more of what it takes. So this is really interesting in terms of don't confuse helping with meddling. Know your role, know your place, and have the humility to believe others have something to offer and the patience to judge if you are right. This is so great when you experience this, and it's so hurtful when you are experiencing the opposite. So I think it's absolutely true. Where was it that he says about listening being incredibly important? I'll come back to that. You have been hired for your experience, but you will be valued most for your character. And it's true. Increasingly, the focus is on how you make money, not just how much money you take. And all of these 5 points, I believe, if applied by a non-executive director, by a chair, is going to spell success for them and also for their board and, of course, their company. Another thing that I learned, or in that he also mentions here, Sir Roger, about listening, and you don't always have to speak. Another interesting director is Paula Rosput Reynolds, who is now the chair of National Grid. I'll come to her shortly, but basically she said something similar when I had the opportunity to speak with her as well. So what's really interesting about her too is her predecessor was Sir Peter Gershon, who for me is also similarly admirable as Sir Roger Carr. And then, of course, at BAE Systems, we now have Cressida Hogg, who is a successor to Sir Roger. And then at Babcock, you had Mike Turner, and now you have Ruth Cairnie, who I think is also really exceptional based on my experience. So it's just incredible how you have the passing of the baton. It feels like with Roger still being entirely, pertinent with his views on good non-executive directorship, and Mike Turner and Peter Gershon handing over to this next generation of chairs who just happen to be women. I didn't mean to actually be ultra feminist. But it just happens to be the case that there's that baton passing. So good governance stands the test of time, right? So I'm Anita. There's no need for me to go through my nerdy study, but I will put this up because I think your story provides significant inspiration on what it takes to succeed as both an executive and non-executive, while also being true to yourself and being kind. Another thing that I look at these days, people in similar positions, is how good is their track record and their performance versus how good they are with PR. So I think with Dame Anita, to be honest with you, I struggled actually to find many news articles about her because she's relatively private and quite understated. So when she became a dame, I was actually really, really happy because it meant that it was people around her probably lobbying to get her. Of course, it would be people lobbying to get for these honors, right? But basically, she got it because of her creds, because of her track record, because of her character, and because of the people around her who truly believe that she deserves to be a dame. So that gives me hope. Yeah. Thanks, Dame Anita, for being a badass. I hope to meet you in person soon. I will try to go to Derby next year. So we mentioned Sir Roger Carr as an example of classic and timeless good governance, and also mentioned Sir Peter Gershon, Paula Rosput Reynolds' predecessor at National Grid, and who is very well known for his governance practices and his success as a non-executive director. I personally watched very closely the handover from Sir Peter to Paula and how Paula came in as a non-executive director for the first 3 months, then to allow time for her to transition into the chair role. And then after those 3 months, allowed Sir Peter to gracefully step away. I thought that was so well done. And there, we also mentioned Mike Turner at Babcock, the predecessor to Ruth Cairnie. So it feels like it is indeed a new era. So you've got these gentlemen in their 70s who basically have now handed over to these younger women. For me, I'm also really lucky to have the guidance and the friendship, in fact, of an amazing mentor in Paul Lester, who himself is also an engineer and a great business person, and to get the support and the advice. And to be honest with you, sometimes even that, hard love, basically, sometimes being told, what are you doing? Are you sure? Why are you not making any money? You should be looking at other ways of accomplishing what you want to accomplish. So I think it's just so helpful to have people around you that inspire you and that truly believe in you. And for you, for each of us, to be that person as well to someone else, no matter how junior or senior we are. Because watching greatness in action, I think, is much more galvanizing than we think it is. So, thank you to all of those great men and women and non-binary individuals who basically advance humanity forward with their commitment to good governance and stewardship. So, continuing our discussion on the spirit of AGMs, with Pearson PLC, the FTSE 100 education company focused on lifelong learning. To be honest, I think this company is doing many amazing things, and I am very excited about their modernization strategy under the leadership of their new CEO, Omar Abosh. On a side note, to be honest, given the fact that they have such cool people on the board, you've got an outstanding businessman here who is a tech bro himself. He's also on the board of Klarna. So this is the chair, Omid Kordestani. And then you've got Chief Tech Bro here, former Microsoft and Accenture and pal of Will I Am, and the woman who basically helped to democratize investing in the UK through her founding of Interactive Investor and her push for entrepreneurship and the spread of financial literacy. I'm surprised that not more Gen Zs are involved in Pearson. I will take a look at that in relation to trading 212 just very briefly here, but I think this is an exciting company. Obviously, not financial advice, just personal opinion from someone who has been attending these AGMs. So it would be important to recognize the individuals who make good governance and engagement happen. In my opinion, that generally begins with the company secretary. And in the case of Pearson, it would be the general counsel, corporate and company secretary in Graeme Baldwin. I don't think Graeme likes his picture being up so much on the interweb, but here we are anyway, recognizing him and his team for the great work that they're doing at Pearson. So to begin with, running an AGM as well produced and as smooth as theirs takes a lot of time and effort. I'll be honest, in observing the AGM from coming in with the registrar team all lined up, the internal Pearson team ushering people into the AGM room, to the lighting, the audio, the visual production, it's a lot of work. And it gives hope to people like me that large caps like Pearson take the in-person element of AGMs very seriously and are committed to providing this to their equally committed shareholders. So at the AGM, there were about 50 individuals who were in attendance, largely retail, but possibly one or two institutional investors, and of course, guests. So it is a lot of work. It's not just the AGM that Graeme and the company secretariat have to deal with. They obviously have the annual report and, of course, the notice of meeting, as well as engagement to take care of. So I want to take a look at the full suite of activities that we observe at T to conclude the quality of engagement of a company. So something as simple as an annual general meeting landing page and the notice of meeting itself are important to determining the quality of the engagement. So here you have a very clear, straightforward landing page for the AGMs of Pearson. What is remarkable about their landing page is the comprehensiveness of this. So unlike many companies, they actually make public the AGM recording. So here's the 2024 AGM. I think it's just helpful to watch and get a flavor of the company. And here we are. So Mr. Omid Kordestani, clearly a sharp dresser, at the 2024 AGM. The recording for the 2025 is not yet up, but I expect that will be up shortly. So very simple, but important and distinguishable. I want to take a look at the notice of AGM itself. Now, this might seem like a no-brainer, but you would be surprised at the variability of the quality of the notices of AGM. There isn't really a standard template or format, which is fine, but in some cases, it's almost like you need a PhD to just find out the location, the date, and the time of these AGMs, whereas with this one, it's in your face. Notice of annual general meeting. When will it be held? 10:30 a.m. on Friday, the 2nd of May. Where will it be held? At Pearson's registered offices at 80 Strand. What can shareholders expect in terms of activities? Well, 9:30 registration, 10:30 the actual AGM itself with the chair's introduction, the CEO's business update, Q&As, and the actual vote. And then 11:30, the AGM closes. It also provides additional information on alternative modes of participating, including electronics. So they use Lumi to allow shareholders to participate online. Um, Bizarrely, this year there were no questions online, um, which then makes me concerned about the company's future use of electronic participation if there is low um, take up. However, there are alternatives to expensive platforms. As I pointed out earlier, some companies are actually just using Zoom or Teams to provide electronic participation to their shareholders. So there's so many ways of um, making engagement available to shareholders. So this is well done. Thanks very much, guys. So in terms of just going through the exemplary engagement provided by Pearson, I want to run through some of the criteria or metrics that we look at. It sounds more formal than it actually is, but essentially there is a method to us determining how well companies are engaging. So I think it's worthwhile looking at this table on the left here, which we use to guide us with what to look out for in terms of good engagement. So as mentioned, I attended Pearson's 2024 AGM and subsequently wrote to the company thanking them for their engaging AGM and the fairness and robustness in which the chair managed the meeting. I also wanted to make sure to call out and appreciate one director in particular who I thought was probably unfairly judged by proxy advisory agencies and institutional investors, which I have seen regularly with others in similar roles to her as the chair of the Remuneration Committee. So basically, I wanted to call out Sherry Kutu for her work globally as one of the most important people, in my opinion, for democratizing investing in this country through her founding of Interactive Investor and also for her philanthropic work of promoting financial literacy, promoting STEM, helping entrepreneurs scale up, involved in policy making. Um, and so basically, I think it was just an important message for me to send out to this company to tell them that we hear you, we see you, and that potentially retail shareholders could have a different view from proxy advisory agencies box ticking when it comes to remuneration. In sending that letter, engagement ensued between myself, Graeme, and Christy Wollstonecroft, also in company secretariat, and the chair of the Remuneration Committee. And in July, I came to see them and presented some information, including the slide that you are seeing here, which basically talks about the criteria that we look out for at T to determine the quality of a company's AGM engagement. So the notice of AGM and the quality of the communications running up to that AGM was the AGM hybrid. So as most of us already know, hybrid, where there's availability to participate both in person and online, is considered to be best practice in the UK, and we would agree with that. Full board presence. Now, this year, unlike last year, one of the board directors was not there. But to be honest, it's perfectly understandable why this person was not there. So the person in question is Alison Dolan, who is also the CFO of Marks and Spencer. And as we know, Marks and Spencer, like the cooperative, has been the subject of a serious cyber attack. So I think we can forgive Alison Dolan for not being there. And then how was the presentation? The CEO, once again, provided his business update, which I thought was robust, and he emphasized the modernization agenda of Pearson and provided concrete evidence of being on track and basically hitting targets. And then following that was a fair and robust Q&A session, to be honest. And then in terms of the spirit of good governance, I believe that that's embodied on an ongoing basis. I'm actually quite surprised that a company of this size and scale does not get called out more in terms of the work it does to engage their investors, or maybe historically they've tried to stay, excuse me, under the radar because of criticisms they may have had in the past around things like remuneration. But for me, I think this is a really exciting company, and as we will see when we look at some of the directors, how exciting the future can be for Pearson, and how I believe Gen Zs could be interested in the company, and how innovative is the AGM, or what additional things have they done to make them exemplary. In this case, I've already mentioned that they have a simple but effective AGM landing page where they make available the recording of their AGM, which frankly, not many companies do. Pearson are continuing to do good work when it comes to shareholder engagement. So thank you so much for that, Graeme, Christy, and team. We look forward to you continuing that purposefulness. So wanting to move on to people, but I will do something different. I am going to call out first a fellow retail shareholder in this gentleman here, who is called Robert Evan Ralph. So Mr. Ralph has been a long time shareholder in Pearson, and basically last year I had the opportunity to sit next to him, and we got chatting, and he told me about being a long time investor in Pearson. And then guess what? This year, here he is, and here I am. So I'm hoping that I will be able to attend on a yearly basis, and that for a very long time, I will see Mr. Ralph, and we can continue to do our selfies together. We have a very experienced and diverse group of people that make up the Pearson board. So let's have a quick look and see what we have got here. Helpful to have this board composition table, which clearly shows that this is a diverse group of people. There's, in fact, more women than there are men, and nationalities across the board in terms of American, British, Canadian, Irish, and then you have ethnic diversity as well. So you've got a diverse group of people, I think on average quite young. You've got the chair, who is a businessman and who is also a tech bro. He is on the board of Klarna and was executive chair of Twitter. How cool is he? And he also looks like the guy who just came out of a yacht. So how does he look so fresh all the time? Anyway, let's focus, Cheryl. Let's take a look at the outstanding board directors of Pearson. Frankly, as I mentioned before, this group makes me excited because of the quality of the people that they have. I do hope they continue to be good stewards for Pearson. So you've got the chair, the CEO, I think has great promise. He is a Cambridge engineer, and he also wrote this book. So I actually brought it with me at the AGM in the hopes that he would sign it, but I had missed him because I was too busy chatting with my, tech girl crush, Sherry Kutu. So come on, she's Canadian. She founded Interactive Investor, and her name is Sherry. I'm Cheryl, so like, could you blame me? But anyway, I should have actually spent more time probably engaging with others. So why would the retail component be important for Pearson to pay attention? Look, as the company continues to evolve and as our capital markets continue to proceed in the way it's proceeding, with the potential risk of continued institutional outflow, although the Trump tariffs might be changing this, it's just really important to make sure that all constituents of Pearson's shareholder base are actively managed, and if there is to be an activist situation, it makes it even doubly, triply important for the company to know all of its shareholders. So given the voting turnout of this company, which basically has voting participation from 70%, 79% of the issued share capital, so nearly 80% of the issued share capital, one can conclude that it has a heavily institutional shareholder base. However, 20% is probably held by retail, either directly registered or through private client brokers like Interactive Investor, Trading 212, and Hargreaves Lansdown, AJ Bell, etc. So it would be important to make sure that that 20%, which could become huge in the case of an activist fight, is understood and basically actively managed. Also, as investor relations evolves to be more inclusive of individual investors who, frankly, particularly the younger generations, are increasing in wealth, a modern company like Pearson might be interested in exploring engagement with the next generation of investors, including those high net worth younger generations. Also, as the company progresses into its modernization agenda under its very cool CEO, who happens to be a tech bro, it could be quite interesting for the company to explore the retail route in terms of additional new investors. And they do have a wide customer base, and the idea of customer shareholders is also really interesting, right? In terms of cultivating. So understanding the retail component is critical for that kind of strategy realization of customer shareholders. And then, of course, in the case of possible shareholder activism or institutional shareholder dissent, it would be good to be able to rely upon retail shareholder support, especially given the fact or the possibility that retail don't always see the world exactly in the same way as institutions. As we see in the US, with the most recent example being Tesla, with Elon Musk's pay of $54 billion, basically that vote passed largely because of retail shareholder participation. Retail represents 45% of Tesla's issued share capital, which is huge. And just looking at this voting turnout here, so essentially institutions have long memories, and sometimes they vote in line with how they voted before, including on director elections, where the director is the chair of the remuneration committee, etc., and they have an issue with the remuneration. Here, there is an extra anomaly. It's not a huge amount, but 2.74 million withheld on Alison Dolan. So the non-executive director of Pearson, who is also the CFO of Marks and Spencer. And that might potentially be as a result of the mini drama involving Alison Dolan moving from Rightmove to Marks and Spencer. I actually went to the Rightmove AGM last year, but I was 15 minutes late because I got lost. And then by the time I got there, the AGM had already ended because it was just a voting process. There was no presentation from the CEO, which was a shame. But I did get a chance to chat with the chair of Rightmove, and I think he is interesting and is very progressive. So I will see how I can attend that AGM again this year.